Hey everyone, welcome to my channel where the strange, the unexplained, and the downright creepy come to life. From real-life encounters with the paranormal to bizarre, true stories that'll keep you up at night, I bring you the eerie tales you won't hear anywhere else. If you're into late-night chills, mysterious happenings, and things that go bump in the night, you're in the right place. Subscribe, buckle up, and let's dive into the unknown. In Modern Kitchen Night, a man stands frozen, coffee mug halted midair. Narrator, Theo. No one had called me Sparky in over 30 years. The digital clock on the microwave blinks. 3:17 a.m. His green glow the sole illumination. In home office night, stacks of financial reports litter the desk. Narrator, Theo. Working late had earned me a corner office at Meridian Financial but cost me a marriage. In kitchen night, shadows pool in the corners. Narrator, Theo. This house, a modernist monument on Blackwater Lake, was supposed to be my reward. He sips coffee, unease rippling through him. Narrator, Theo. I blame stress, 80-hour weeks, and ambient-induced sleep. Rational explanations over childhood nicknames whispered by empty houses. In home office night, he drains his coffee, returning to quarterly projections. In house various next 3 days, he acclimates to the house's rhythms. Creaks, appliance hums, lake winds. Narrator, Theo. I convinced myself that night was an anomaly, exhaustion and caffeine-induced hallucination. In kitchen morning, he finds a Mickey Mantle 1956 Topps baseball card inside the Wall Street Journal. Narrator, Theo. Not just any card, my card. Bent corner, blue ink stain from my uncle's aborted attempt to write my name. In kitchen, continuous. His fingers tremble, tracing the familiar damage. Narrator, Theo. I traded it away in 1988 to Bobby Winters for his fossil collection. He drops the card. It flutters to the marble floor. Narrator, Theo. No rational explanation. This artifact from my past shouldn't be here. In living room, night. He double-checks locks, activates the security system, pours Macallan 25. Narrator, Theo. 3 fingers of Macallan to dull the creeping dread. Movement flickers in his peripheral vision. Smarter.com. Narrator, Theo. A shadow where none should be. He turns sharply. Nothing there. Narrator, Theo. Loosing your mind, old man? I muttered. Another voice answers, distant yet clear. SolarWinds documentation. +3. Smarter.com. +3. Blogging tips. +3. Voice, OS. Sparky. Remember the oath. The whiskey glass shatters on the floor. In living room, continuous. He backs away, heel crunching on broken glass, spine against the cold window. Narrator, Theo. Outside, Blackwater Lake reflects a waning moon. I felt exposed, watched from within and without. In living room, later. He sits rigid in a leather armchair, all lights ablaze, clutching a golf club. Narrator, Theo. By morning, I convinced myself it was an elaborate prank, rivals or disgruntled employees. In briefcase, day. He finds a photograph, himself at 13, standing before a crude structure in the woods. Narrator, Theo. My hands were bloody, smiling, but something was wrong with my eyes, reflecting the camera flash like a nocturnal animal. Behind him, a tall, thin shape with elongated fingers rests on his shoulder. Narrator, Theo. A shape I'd convinced myself I'd invented. In kitchen, day. He burns the photograph in the sink. Narrator, Theo. Expecting relief, but the smoke coalesced, forming shapes my mind struggled to interpret. In living room, night. His reflection in the window glass shows another face, ancient and hungry. In house, various days later. He stops going to work, answering calls. The house feels alive, walls pulsing with a subtle rhythm. Narrator, Theo. Artifacts appear. A pocket knife with my initials, a torn folklore book page, a smooth river stone with strange symbols. Whispers multiply, a chorus of voices speaking nearly intelligible words. Narrator, Theo. Only 2 words clear. Blood oath. In garage day. He attempts to leave, but the Tesla won't start. Phone and landline are dead. XT. Front door, day. Opening the door reveals an impenetrable darkness. A void shifting like something alive. In house, night. Dreams begin. Rituals, an entity from his youth offering success in exchange for a promise. Narrator, Theo. A promise sealed with blood from a palm sliced with a rusty pocket knife. In bedroom, morning. He finds instructions in his childish handwriting on the back of his Harvard diploma. Narrator, Theo. Symbols to be drawn, words to be spoken, blood to be offered. Final line. Then he shall come through, and the oath will be fulfilled. In house, various days later. He resists, but the house deteriorates. Walls bleed black substance. Rooms rearrange. Time becomes unreliable. In bathroom, day. The mirror shows 2 futures. One completing the ritual, one resisting. Narrator, Theo. Only one left anything recognizable of the world I knew. In living room, night. He gathers artifacts, arranges them as per instructions, speaks ancient syllables. Narrator, Theo. Instead of offering blood, I changed the terms of our agreement. The air shimmers. A vortex opens, pulling at reality. In living room, continuous. The entity materializes, a mass of shadows and angles. Narrator, Theo. We were locked in stalemate. It spoke into my mind, promising bargains, threatening retribution. He whispers a name, the entity's true name. In living room, moments later, the portal vanishes. Artifacts gone. The house remains damaged but silent. XT. Blackwater Lake, dawn. Through shattered windows, the lake reflects the first light of dawn. Narrator, Theo. The world looked solid again, real and ordinary in the growing light. Fade out. I knew it wouldn't last. Things like that don't surrender easily. Yes, I'd won for now, but I had no illusions it was truly gone. I'd bought time, perhaps even a kind of understanding. I left that house with nothing but the clothes on my back and the knowledge etched into my mind. I didn't look back as I walked the long gravel driveway toward the main road. Some prices are too high no matter what's offered in return. Some debts can't be paid without losing something essential. I don't know what will happen when it finds another way in. Another bargain, another ritual, another door left open. But next time, I'll be ready. Some promises are meant to be broken. 2. There's a moment when you realize your house no longer belongs to you. It happens quietly. A doorknob turns when no one's there. A latch clicks open in an empty corridor. That's how it began for me. Small disturbances, too easily dismissed. Creaking floorboards, shifting pipes. But houses don't reach. Houses don't breathe. Houses certainly don't hunger. At least that's what I believed before I broke through the walls. I'd lived in this Victorian for 15 years. It was my sanctuary. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, a study. I knew every creak, every drafty corner. I could walk it blindfolded. The first sign came on a Tuesday in late October. I was alone in the study, the radiator clanging against the autumn chill. Something drew my eyes to the hallway. My bedroom's brass doorknob, slowly turning clockwise. I froze, turned deliberately, fully, then stopped. No one entered. No door opened. I blamed temperature changes. The house was old. But it happened again. And again. Different doors. Same movement. Sometimes a full turn. Sometimes a slight jiggle. Like someone testing the lock. I started avoiding doorknobs altogether. The contractor found nothing. Loose hardware, he said. Old floors tilt. Plausible. I decided to renovate, starting with the upstairs bathroom. It had always been too small anyway. When they stripped the drywall, I noticed something wrong. The interior dimensions didn't match the exterior. The bathroom was narrower than it should have been. The contractor shrugged. Old houses, he said. Nothing's ever square. But I felt it. Space was missing. The renovation took 2 weeks. It should have brought relief. Instead, the unease deepened. The bathroom felt wrong, like it belonged to somewhere else. Then, one night, I woke to running water. The sink was gushing, nearly overflowing. I hadn't used it. When I looked in the mirror, my reflection lagged. Just a fraction of a second. But enough. Enough to know. I backed out. The door, half closed, swung wider, revealing not my hallway, but a corridor lit by flickering gas lamps. It stretched far beyond the limits of my home. Wallpaper I'd never chosen. Floorboards too wide, too dark. I shut the door, breathed, waited. When I opened it again, the hallway had returned. It happened again. This time, my bedroom door opened to a version of my living room. Same shape, different soul. Reds and browns instead of blue and gray. And someone sat in the armchair. Me. But not quite. The face was mine, but stretched too far. The eyes too wide. The smile wrong. I slammed the door. That was the beginning of the mapping. I started documenting when and where the anomalies occurred. I learned that between 3:17 and 3:42 a.m., the dining room door opened to a cobweb version of itself, abandoned for decades. The front door at sunset opened onto an endless hallway of identical doors. The basement sometimes led to a cavernous industrial space tended by things that moved too fast to see. And always, in every alternate world, I caught glimpses of the others. My neighbor with cat's eyes, my ex-wife moving in ways joints shouldn't allow, my brother speaking in voices that came from behind him. The renovation, I realized, had damaged something. The house now existed across dimensions, simultaneously. A nexus, a breach. I spoke to engineers, architects, even a paranormal expert. Nothing helped until I met an elderly professor of theoretical physics. He spoke of superposition, of particles that exist in multiple states until observed. He said, almost casually, that perhaps old homes, watched by so many for so long, might wear thin between realities. I didn't tell him the others had started noticing me. One evening, I saw my father in a wrong version of my kitchen. He stood motionless at the sink. Then he turned, his eyes black, his teeth too many. He pointed at me. Since then, things escalated. Coffee mugs moved. Furniture rearranged itself. Doors opened while I watched them. Sometimes the wallpaper flickered, revealing other patterns. Sometimes the floor shifted beneath my feet like the house was breathing. Voices spoke through the walls. Unfamiliar languages and laughter not quite human. I considered leaving, but I knew the house would follow. Or worse, the breach already existed within me. And some part of me, some secret part, was fascinated. Finally, I made a choice. I would stop documenting. I would enter. At 3:33 a.m., I opened the bathroom door. It led to a cathedral impossibly vast, supported by bone-like columns. At its center was a scale model of my house. Around it stood dozens of figures. Some looked like friends. Others were strangers. And some were unclassifiable. They turned to face me. One stepped forward. Another version of me, older, gray-haired, lined. He gestured toward the model. His voice came not as words but as impressions, sinking into my thoughts. He showed me each room a gateway to another world. The renovation had torn through the barriers. And now the entities on the other side wanted through. Some, he said, were curious. Others were hungrier. I asked if the damage could be undone. The reply came from all of them at once. A voice of voices, merging into one. Yes, but only by acknowledging the truth, by learning to navigate consciously, by rebuilding the boundaries, or face collapse, the merging of all realities, the unraveling of everything. I returned, changed. I learned to open the right doors, to close them. I reinforced the walls with symbols, herbs, words not meant for human tongues. The manifestations faded. The house grew quiet, but I know they're still there. All the other versions, all the other me's, pressing gently at the edges of this world. I've made peace with it. This is no longer just a house. It's a crossroads, and I keep the gates. Between the walls, I live here now with my other selves. They keep to their own dimensions. We've reached an understanding, a mutual pact of non-interference. Sometimes I catch glimpses of them through mirrors or windows, living lives nearly identical to mine. And sometimes, when the light hits just right, I see through the solid surfaces of this place, glimpsing the true structure of my home. An impossible lattice of realities layered like pages in a book. I no longer fear the turning doorknobs. I listen now, trying to understand what they're saying. The first break. It began with silence. Not the peaceful hush of a home at rest, but a hollow, expectant quiet, as though the house itself were holding its breath. I should have noticed the way time thickened at the edges, like oil bleeding into water. But hindsight is always generous with clarity. That night, I'd invited 3 friends over for dinner. A small gathering, something to break the spiral of isolation after the separation. The meal was good. The wine, too expensive for my budget, flowed easily. Laughter bloomed around the table. Then came the sound. A sharp, crystalline shatter, glass breaking somewhere nearby. Conversation died mid-sentence. My apartment is small. The sound had come from the living room, barely 10 feet away. Aaron arched an eyebrow. Was I expecting anyone else? I shook my head. As I rose, a strange pressure settled in my chest. The others followed in silence, tension coiling around us as we moved down a hallway that felt too long. There, on the center of the carpet, stood a wine glass, upright, unbroken, pristine. The same style we'd been drinking from. No cracks, no wine, no sign of a fall. Sarah suggested a neighbor. I nodded, knowing she was wrong. Back at the table, conversation limped along, brittle and forced. They left soon after. Alone again, I returned to the glass. I reached for it, half expecting my hand to pass through like mist. But it was solid and ice-cold. Beneath it, impossibly, a pool of wine pressed upward into the glass's base, defying gravity. That night, I couldn't sleep. My heartbeat felt too loud, too present. At 3 a.m., it happened again. Another crash, this time in the kitchen. I sat upright, sweat slicking my skin. Every step toward the light switch felt like moving through syrup. I found my favorite mug, shattered that morning, intact beside the sink. Coffee stains clung inside it, not dripping but rising, crawling slowly against gravity. When I touched it, I saw it all in reverse. My hand, the fall, the reassembly. Time moving backward. 2. The unraveling. The days that followed brought escalation. The bathroom mirror, cracked for months, was suddenly whole. As I stared at my reflection, a web of fractures bloomed and vanished in cycles, looping like corrupted footage. My reflection held steady. The mirror did not. And then it changed entirely. The towels were different. The soap. The paint was the old shade I'd painted over. For a second, I wasn't looking at a mirror. I was looking into a different time. I saw movement. My own face, blurred. Then it was gone. By the week's end, I'd mapped the anomalies. The northwest corner of the living room, most of the kitchen, parts of the bathroom. Time flowed strangely in those places, tidal, unreliable. I avoided them where I could. But the apartment wasn't big enough to escape. Objects moved, returned to old positions. Broken things made whole. Photos on my phone blurred or distorted, but some caught the impossible. Plates reforming midair, sofa cushions healing themselves. Sometimes I saw people, faint, translucent figures. Myself, friends, my ex. They never acknowledged me. Echoes, recordings, time slipping. I couldn't tell anyone. The words dissolved before I could speak them. My phone buzzed with concerned messages. I left them unread. 3. The spiral. 10 days in, the loop began to compress. The anomalies came faster, lingered longer. Events repeated. Not just objects, memories, actions. Time wasn't looping. It was spiraling, pulling me inward. 12 days in, it changed again. The bathroom mirror didn't reflect me. Instead, I saw myself from nearly a year before. Razor in hand, contemplating shaving the beard I'd grown during the worst of the separation. But this time, past me looked up. Saw me. His head tilted. His lips moved. It's contracting. I fled the room, shaking. I knew, then, it was no longer confined to objects. It was affecting me. The versions of myself were converging. That night, I packed a bag. I had to leave to see if it was the apartment or if I carried the anomaly within me. As I zipped the duffel, the lights began to pulse, syncing with my heartbeat. The air thickened, like wading through water. I made it to the door. Then everything changed. Furniture reassembled itself into past configurations. Paint shifted hue. Decorations vanished. My apartment reverted to how it had looked the day I'd moved in. And I wasn't alone. Another me stood in the center of the living room, duffel in hand. His face was hollow, eyes sunken with exhaustion. He stared at me with the same horror I felt. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Time wasn't just looping. It was collapsing, a spiral tightening until all versions of me converged into one. We raised our hands. Instinctively, slowly, the air shimmered, a high-pitched whine rising between us. The moment our fingers touched, silence. Everything froze. Dust, light, sound. Still. And then rewind. A backward plunge through memory. Every second relived in reverse. My timeline, his timeline. Dozens of loops, hundreds of choices, variations I hadn't lived. In some, I tried to document it. In others, I told people. Always it ended the same. Until I was back. Seated at the dining table. Friends laughing. Wine pouring. Sarah mid-sentence. The beginning. For the decision. I knew what was coming. The sound of breaking glass. The trigger. The fracture. But knowledge is power. This time I could choose. So I did. When the sound came, sharp, familiar, I stayed seated. Aaron looked at me, expectant. I smiled, tight and unnatural. "It's nothing," I said. "Just the neighbors." My voice sounded wrong, stiff, but they accepted it. Slowly, conversation resumed. My heart thundered. I didn't look toward the hallway. I didn't stand. And still, part of me waits for time to rebel, for the spiral to tighten once more, for the loop to refuse my defiance. But for now, for this moment, I remain, waiting to see if change is possible. I still remember the exact moment I realized something was wrong. The bathroom light flickered, casting a pale, sickly glow that made my skin crawl. The house was silent, late-night quiet, but there was something else in the air. Attention like static before a storm. My eyes locked onto a single black tile nestled among the white ones on the newly renovated wall. It pulsed faintly under the light, like it was breathing. I froze. Something in me recoiled, but I stepped closer anyway. That was the beginning. The tile had been the contractor's idea. A modern contrast, he'd said. A single black tile set randomly to break the monotony. I hadn't thought twice, but from the moment the renovation ended, the room felt wrong. Started small. The lighting always seemed too dim, no matter the bulbs. The air was heavy, stale, like a sealed tomb. There was a metallic tang beneath the scent of grout and soap. And always that tile watching, waiting. Couldn't help but look. Every time I passed, I peeked in. It absorbed the light around it, reflecting the room back in warped geometry. My own face looked wrong. Eyes wider, features stretched. It made me nauseous, yet I couldn't stop. One day, I leaned in close, almost touching it. For a second, just a second, I saw something. A horizon, shimmering inside the tile. I staggered back, heart racing. My brain said illusion. My gut said otherwise. The dreams began soon after. Alien landscapes under bruised purple skies. Twin suns overhead. Breathing rock formations. I'd wake drenched in sweat, convinced the bathroom was whispering to me. Always, that tile gleamed in the dark. Over time, the compulsion grew. I'd stand before it, breath shallow, searching for movement in its depths. The more I stared, the more I was sure. Something was in there. A world behind the tile. A door. One night, I turned off the bathroom light. Only the dim hallway glow remained. The tile began to emit its own faint light. The air thickened, humming softly. Vertigo struck. I gripped the sink to stay upright. The room wasn't right anymore. Angles stretched, corners sagged. The laws of physics had loosened. Still, I returned. The white walls darkened to a grayish tone, the corners no longer met cleanly, and the bathroom window seemed to shrink. My mirror began showing glimpses of unfamiliar rooms, walls pulsing, reflections distorted, and the tile, there were more of them. 2, then 3, but only one on the actual wall. Was the mirror lying, or was it showing the future? I stopped letting people into my home. I told myself it was paranoia, stress, but I knew better. Sometimes I heard voices, not speaking, chanting, a language I didn't know, but understood somewhere deep in my bones. I found myself mouthing words under my breath, foreign syllables I didn't recognize. Then the cracks appeared, not ordinary ones. These slithered across the tiles in glowing patterns, like roots. The fixtures began to distort, sink edges rippling, mirror glass warping. My reflection changed too. My eyes sunken, skin drawn tight. I looked like someone else. In my dreams, the bathroom transformed into an infinite corridor of black tiles. The air thick with voices and unseen life. Something ancient waited at the end. Watching, waiting. One night I saw it. In the black tile, a reflection that wasn't mine. Hollow eyes, stretched grin. It beckoned. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. The next day, I tried to destroy the tile. Chisel and hammer in hand, I struck. The moment the metal touched porcelain, the room convulsed. The walls rippled like water. The voices screamed, collapsed, shaking. The tile bore a single thin crack, but it was still whole, defiant, alive. I considered leaving, but I couldn't. Something in me needed to know. I returned again and again, each visit peeling away my fear, replacing it with obsession. On the final night, the bathroom was no longer a bathroom. The walls were breathing. The tiles shimmered, geometry folding in impossible ways. 3 black tiles now formed a doorframe. Within them, stars, purple sky. A pull, soft but undeniable, reached into me. I stood, trembling. The voices were no longer whispers. They were a chorus. My heartbeat synced to their rhythm. My body vibrated with the frequency of the portal. I knelt, bringing my face inches from the tiles. My reflection stared back, no longer mine. It beckoned again. I whispered something. I don't remember what. The tile responded with a deep vibration that rattled my teeth. The shimmer intensified. The door was open. All that remained was the choice, to step through, or to remain here in a world that was no longer mine. The first time I noticed the shifting shadow, I was standing by my living room window, gazing out at the neon-lit skyline. A low, electric hum buzzed in my ears, though I couldn't place its source. My skin prickled, as though jolted by static, and then I saw it. An inky smudge in the far corner of the ceiling, spreading slowly, devouring the soft glow of the overhead lamp. A knot of unease twisted in my gut. My breath grew shallow. Even before I understood what I was seeing, my body sensed the threat. I told myself it was a trick of the light, nothing more. But later that night, brushing my teeth, I spotted the same dark stain hunched behind the shower curtain. My heart slammed against my ribs, sweat chilling on my temples. I yanked the curtain aside, expecting, hoping for nothing. The tiles were as they'd always been, and silence pressed in heavy around me. Over the following days, the apartment changed. The lights flickered at random despite new bulbs. Shadows thickened in corners. A scraping sound, like nails dragged across concrete, seeped from the walls. Twice, I woke in the early morning with the overwhelming sense that someone had stood at the foot of my bed. Each time, I found only empty air and the pounding echo of my own breath. Neighbors began mentioning strange things. Fatigue, vivid dreams, a vague sense of unease. One man's eyes looked dull, as though something vital had drained from him. Another woman whispered about hearing voices in the stairwell and walls that seemed to vibrate at night. Their stories were fragmented, hesitant. Still, each detail sharpened my own fear. Returning home after dark became unbearable. I'd linger in my car or in the lobby, forcing myself to move forward. Every time I turned the key in the lock, I swore I felt the apartment inhale, just slightly, but enough. Inside, the presence grew stronger. At first, the black smear was shapeless. Then it took form, a shimmering outline with tendrils flickering in and out of view. Eventually, limbs emerged, long, unnatural arms and legs that didn't belong to anything human. When I first saw those limbs, a cold wave rushed through me. My body wanted to shut down rather than confront it. I began waking each day feeling drained, like I hadn't slept in weeks. My limbs were heavy. My thoughts slowed. Memory holes appeared, small at first, then larger. I'd find half-eaten meals, missed calls I didn't remember. I started talking to my neighbors more. I never repeated their words directly. It felt dangerous, as though naming it gave it power. But I listened. They spoke of silhouettes crawling on walls, voices in vents, walls that seemed to breathe. And I began to suspect the truth. This thing, this entity, existed in the in-between spaces, crawl spaces, air ducts behind the walls. It wasn't confined to my flat. It was in the building itself. Some neighbors changed. Not drastically, but enough. Their movements grew stiff, delayed. Their eyes were vacant, their smiles mechanical. One night, I passed a man in the hallway, stiff as a statue, staring at the wall. He didn't move until I spoke. When he turned, his greeting was hollow, his expression wrong. I rushed inside, heart racing. That night, the shadow grew. It towered over me, 8 feet tall, a starless void of twisting limbs and a faceless head that tracked my every movement. My legs gave out. A piercing ring drilled into my ears, and I couldn't breathe. It didn't strike. It leaned in, slow and elegant, almost curious. The fatigue hit like a wave. My vision blurred. I clenched my jaw to stay conscious. Then nothing. I woke on the floor, numb and gasping, unsure how long I'd been there. After that, time became unreliable. I'd find things misplaced. I'd forget entire conversations. I tried explaining to a friend over the phone, but my thoughts scattered mid-sentence. I sought refuge in the basement car park, hoping to escape its reach. But even there, the lights flickered and scraping sounds echoed through the concrete. I knocked on a neighbor's door to share my suspicions, but his eyes were too wide, pupils blown. He asked if I felt well, voice too calm, and suggested I stay in my own unit until I felt more like myself. That's when I realized I might be the only one left who hadn't been changed. Not yet. I slammed my door and leaned against it, chest heaving. I wanted to run, to flee the building. But I knew if I left it would follow. It had tasted me, tracked me. It had my scent, and it was using the others to keep watch. That night, a storm battered my windows. The lights failed. Only lightning illuminated the room, revealing flashes of that towering shape. Its limbs, its silhouette, its watching head. My breath came in shallow gasps. My vision swam, and then I heard it. From inside the walls, slow, deliberate scraping. Long fingers searching for a way in. The knowledge gnaws at me, lurking in the dark corners of my mind. It pulses in the interstices of that building, feeding on unsuspecting tenants, replacing them with hollow imitations under its control. Even now, I can feel its reach, its cold fingers brushing against my thoughts, drawing them closer to its insatiable hunger. The air I once breathed in that place, thick with fear and dread, is now a permanent fixture in my chest. I remain vigilant, though I can no longer be certain what's real and what is merely the architecture of my fear. The building stands, silent and indifferent to the world beyond its walls. Yet inside, that festering presence waits, watching for the next spark of life to claim as its own. For those of us who have seen it, the burden is unending. We can never forget the hollow reflections that replace us, the shadows that flicker just beyond our reach. And the question remains, an unspoken weight in the back of our minds. Are we truly free, or have we already been replaced by something else? Story 6, Opening, Rewritten. Darkness swallowed my university office the night I understood that silence can be a living, breathing thing. What had always been a quiet, orderly space, filled with academic journals, dim lighting, and a solitary window overlooking the courtyard, now felt thick with tension. The dust motes that danced lazily in the faint light clung to the air, as though they, too, were trapped in the invisible weight pressing down on the room. My pulse quickened, a hollow thump in my chest, and I could not shake the sensation that someone, was watching me. My name is Thomas Lambert, and I teach comparative literature at a small, prestigious institution known for its Gothic architecture and labyrinthine hallways. Each polished corridor hums with its own personality, some solemn, others curiously inviting, like a whisper meant only for you. My office had always felt neutral, almost comforting, a sanctuary in which I could lose myself in my work. The stack of papers needing grading was a constant companion, a testament to my routine. Professors, I suppose, find peace in their clutter, their organized chaos that only they understand. But a week ago, everything shifted. The energy in the room had changed, as though someone had rearranged the furniture in the dark without touching a single piece. At first, I told myself it was nothing, a trick of the mind, fatigue settling in after too many late nights. But deep down, I knew something else was at play. Late one evening, while gathering research notes on symbolic representations in ancient texts, I heard it, the creak of my office door, pushed by the faintest breath of wind from the hallway. The sudden sensation of being watched set my body into motion before my mind could catch up. My shoulders tensed, a cold sweat forming along my hairline. The overhead fluorescent light hummed, flickering intermittently, casting the room in brief moments of darkness before the harsh light returned. Then, a sharp clatter broke the quiet. My heart nearly leapt from my chest. I jerked upright, eyes darting across the room, and there it was, a ceramic bookend, one of many on my old wooden bookshelf, lying on the floor, spinning slowly as though propelled by some unseen force. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity, unable to look away. The bookshelf itself was untouched. The books were neatly in place, arranged according to my personal system. But that bookend, with its deliberate motion, told a different story. It hadn't simply toppled over, it had flown. Invisible intention reverberated through my head, summoning an acute paranoia. My hair stood on end whenever a shift in the air made a page flutter. I knew I was too close to something monumental, something that defied conventional logic. I also noticed a creeping dread that this thing, whatever it was, might be using me as a conduit. Every muscle in my body stayed tense for hours on end, to the point where I could hardly remember what it felt like to be calm. My teaching began to suffer. Students commented that I seemed withdrawn and distant. A staff member quietly suggested I see the campus counselor, noticing my bloodshot eyes and jittery movements. I avoided direct conversation, instead offering vague excuses about a busy schedule and important research deadlines. In truth, every part of me was focused on the messages forming in my office. I was convinced that if I ignored them, something far worse would be unleashed. Eventually, the pattern started resembling a complex system of communication. Ancient runes, bits of code, geometrical symbols. My long nights of comparative literature and linguistics gave me the tools to interpret them. It became clear that something non-human, yet possessing immense intelligence, was orchestrating this. The objects, books, statuettes, lamps, chairs, seemed to have melded into a single collective entity, bending to a will that was beyond my comprehension. The realization sent waves of icy terror down my spine. I could feel my skin clammy and taut, my breath shallow with dread. It was as if the entire room was alive, a singular consciousness that demanded my understanding. One evening, after countless hours wrestling with the arrangement, I finally cracked the rudimentary outline of the message. The code referenced an imminent rupture in reality, a fracture that would begin right here in my office. My palms turned slick with cold sweat as I grasped the implication. I read the lines over and over, each time feeling my heart thunder as though it might explode. Every inch of my body screamed to flee, to leave this place and never return. But an urgent instinct kept me anchored. This bizarre collective of objects seemed to be warning me, not threatening me. They wanted me to act, to prevent or at least prepare for some catastrophic event. I told no one, deciding that no colleague would believe me. Even if they did, How could I possibly convey the seriousness of a cosmic tear in the fabric of reality without sounding deranged? My nights turned into a half-sleep plagued by nightmares of the office walls pulsating, collapsing into a void. In those dreams, I was neither fully awake nor asleep. My heartbeat was a constant, frantic tattoo. Every time I woke, I found my clothes damp with sweat, my throat painfully constricted by fear. In the midst of this mental anguish, my self-doubt ballooned. Was I actually losing my mind? Could all of this be the feverish delusion of a man under too much pressure? The more I questioned my sanity, the more real the phenomenon seemed. The textual patterns were too elaborate to be imaginary. The cyclical alignment of the manuscripts, the constant rearranging of the statuettes, the flickering code of the lamp, they had a consistency that surpassed mere hallucination. My despair was so profound that my hands would shake even when I tried to drink water, and I often felt my heartbeat reverberate through my entire body in uncontrollable waves. 2 nights ago, the activity reached a crescendo. The door slammed behind me the moment I stepped inside. All around me, objects trembled. The bookshelf rattled. The papers on my desk fluttered with a frenzied life of their own. And the lamp in the corner flickered manically. My chest grew tight, my stomach churned, and I fought the urge to vomit. Summoning every ounce of courage, I confronted the center of the room as if facing an invisible presence. My legs quivered beneath me, my lungs fighting for air. Then, in an abrupt hush, everything stilled. I could almost feel the charge in the air recede, replaced by a suffocating heaviness. On my desk, the books formed a circle. Inside that circle, the statuettes, figures of ancient gods and creatures, were positioned in a ring, each tilted at a precise angle. My despair was so profound that my hands would shake even when I tried to drink water, and I often felt my heartbeat reverberate through my entire body in uncontrollable waves. 2 nights ago, the activity reached a crescendo. The door slammed behind me the moment I stepped inside. All around me, objects trembled. The bookshelf rattled. The papers on my desk fluttered with a frenzied life of their own. And the lamp in the corner flickered manically. My chest grew tight, my stomach churned, and I fought the urge to vomit. Summoning every ounce of courage, I confronted the center of the room as if facing an invisible presence. My legs quivered beneath me, my lungs fighting for air. Then, in an abrupt hush, everything stilled. I could almost feel the charge in the air recede, replaced by a suffocating heaviness. On my desk, the books formed a circle. Inside that circle, the statuettes, figures of ancient gods and creatures, were positioned in a ring, each tilted at a precise angle. It was the final piece of the puzzle. My heart thundered in my chest, my breath ragged as I knelt to examine it. The arrangement revealed a date and time. Tonight, shortly after midnight. The pattern, now fully decoded, communicated a single dire warning. The rupture would happen then, in this exact spot. I felt a surge of cold adrenaline so potent my hands went numb. My entire body shook with the realization of what was about to unfold. I tried to steel myself, to brace for an event that defies scientific explanation. The minutes slipped away while I stood there, a trembling figure in the gloom of my own office. At midnight, the light overhead crackled and died, plunging the room into near-total darkness. My breath caught in my throat, chest tight with dread, as I groped for the small flashlight in my desk drawer. A metallic taste filled my mouth and sweat rolled down my spine. Then I saw them, the statuettes glowing with a faint, otherworldly luminescence. The edges of the circle they formed seemed to blur and shift, as if space itself was fraying at the seams. My teeth chattered from raw panic, yet I forced my gaze to remain fixed on the phenomenon. I expected some catastrophic tear in reality, an explosion of cosmic energy, or a horrifying spectacle that would annihilate me. Instead, the circle shimmered like a mirage. The walls appeared to breathe in tandem with my ragged gasps. Every object in the room seemed connected by invisible threads of thought. For a moment, I sensed an immense collective presence, a unity of consciousness that transcended physical form. My office had become an aperture, a pressure point in the fabric of existence. Just when I was certain I'd be pulled into this swirling distortion, a blinding flash erupted and then receded into darkness. My flashlight flickered back to life, revealing the office in its normal state. Books scattered on the floor, statuettes resting on the desk. The overhead light buzzed, resurrecting itself. I coughed, my lungs starved for oxygen, and pressed a trembling hand to my pounding heart. No rupture had claimed me or devoured the room, yet the space felt irrevocably changed, like a wound had opened and then sealed itself, leaving an invisible scar behind. I sank into my chair, a rush of feverish relief mingling with lingering fear. The hush in the room was profound, more like a vacuum than mere silence. The weight in my chest remained, a testament to the fact that something extraordinary had just happened. I wasn't sure if the rupture had been prevented or merely postponed. The objects no longer moved as though they had poured every last bit of their energy into that singular moment. Their message had been delivered. In the days since, I've returned to my office with caution. The air still feels charged but quieter, as if the presence that once animated these objects has receded into dormancy. I've deciphered no new patterns, nor have I witnessed any more levitations. Yet I can't shake the sense that this place is sitting on the edge of an unseen precipice. My nights remain sleepless, my heart rate never truly calm, my imagination haunted by the possibility that the warning might resurface in some other form. Even now, as I write these words, I feel a prickling at the nape of my neck, a subtle reminder that reality is not as solid as we like to believe. My reflection in the office window stares back at me with hollow eyes. I wonder if I have merely delayed the inevitable, or if the collective consciousness of these objects has sealed a fissure in time and space. Sometimes, I catch myself listening for the faint hum of movement behind me, adrenaline surging at every unfamiliar sound. I'm left with this final realization. Once you have witnessed the boundaries of reality begin to blur, you can never return to the blissful ignorance of ordinary life. Every room holds secrets, every silence conceals a voice, and every inanimate thing may harbor a watchful awareness. Though I emerged physically intact, the unease gnaws at me constantly. If reality threatened to fracture once, there's no reason it won't happen again. The objects may lie dormant, but I am forever marked by the knowledge of what they can do and what they can warn us about. And that knowledge, more than anything, is what keeps my heart thudding relentlessly in my chest, night after sleepless night. My breath caught in my throat. This was the apartment I'd lived in during one of the roughest periods of my life. I recognized the stains on the worn-out carpet, the chipped paint on the walls. The memory of that time clawed at me. Nights of isolation, crushing loneliness, pacing in silent dread. It had always felt as though the walls were watching me, or worse, as if the room itself were an extension of my mind, confronting me with a piece of my past I had tried desperately to bury. My heart pounded faster. I could almost hear my own anxious whispers from years ago, the ones I used to mumble when the weight of hopelessness became too much to bear. A familiar sensation prickled across my back. That sick certainty of being watched. No one was there, yet something was. I felt it. A single door stood on the far side of the room. I headed toward it, ignoring the growing sense that the floor might buckle beneath my feet. Each step felt heavier than the last. I was lightheaded, vision narrowing at the edges, my breathing ragged. The doorknob was cold against my palm, and at first, it refused to budge. Then a low grinding sound echoed from within the walls, like metal gears shifting behind the plaster, deciding whether to let me pass. Abruptly, the door popped open. Another corridor lay beyond it, unrecognizable. I stepped onto reflective tiles that warped my reflection beneath my feet. My face in the polished surface twisted grotesquely, my eyes wide, sunken, desperate. I forced the image from my mind and pressed forward. The corridor's ceiling arched overhead with stained glass panels. Murky shapes drifted behind them, shapeless, gliding shadows. My pulse thundered. The sense of being watched intensified. I stopped at another door, locked. The silence that filled the corridor was thick, broken only by the ragged sound of my breath. When the lock clicked open beneath my fingers, dread surged through me. It was a room I recognized instantly but never wanted to see again. The conference room from my old job, where I'd endured a string of humiliating confrontations. Overhead lights flickered, casting everything in a sickly fluorescent glare. Empty chairs ringed the long table. My throat constricted at the memory. Sitting there, cornered, sweat rolling down my spine as colleagues accused me of missed deadlines. Poor focus. My head throbbed with tension. The walls stretched wider than the room ever had in real life. A constant hum droned from the lights overhead. Within it, I heard whispering, my name, accusations, syllables like static-laced venom. Though the chairs were empty, I could feel them occupied. Silhouettes from my past leaning forward in silent disapproval. I fumbled toward another door at the back. This one a heavy steel slab painted black. The handle jolted my arm as if it were electrified. My vision blurred. I swayed. Then the door opened. A shadowy corridor greeted me, damp and smelling of rusted pipes and earth. Flickering lights buzzed along the walls. I wiped sweat from my brow. My shirt clung to my skin, soaked through with cold perspiration. The hallway twisted, left, right, downward, its serpentine path architecturally impossible. My home no longer obeyed the rules of space. I understood then. The house had become a maze of my darkest memories, each door a descent deeper into my psyche, every room a stage for my regrets and anxieties. The next door revealed a cluttered storage unit, eerily familiar. Boxes towered around me, labeled in black ink. My chest tightened. I knew what was inside. Remnants of a relationship I had sealed away and tried to forget. I inched forward, a trespasser in a museum of my own failures. One box in the corner bore my name. I pried it open, hands trembling. Inside, old notebooks, battered photographs, a broken necklace. My breath caught. Shame and anger surged in me. The shadows seemed to lean in, curious and hungry. I slammed the box shut and stumbled back. A new corridor had appeared behind me. It shouldn't have existed. The floor felt damp and sponge-like beneath my feet. The walls rippled, reflecting my face in undulating distortions. My dread rose in a crescendo, an overwhelming, roaring panic that blurred the edges of my vision. At the end stood an imposing door, etched with intricate spirals that twisted subtly when I stared too long. The carvings teased the limits of my sight. My palms were slick. My chest heaved. Something compelled me to open it. The door turned easily. No resistance. Inside was a version of my living room, but wrong. Furniture was arranged in warped angles. The walls stretched into impossible points. Heavy black drapes breathed in and out across the windows. On the table sat a single object, an old mirror I barely remembered. Its frame was tarnished, corroded by time and regret. My reflection was faint, as if seen from underwater. Behind me, shadows gathered in the glass. They loomed, upright and silent, like judges. My breath faltered. The presence in the mirror wasn't a reflection. It was a being, ancient and aware. It stared back with eyes that knew every hidden shame. I felt it pressing against the thin barrier of glass. I don't know how long I stood there, staring. My body trembled beneath an invisible weight. The reflection lingered a moment longer than it should have, its lips parting in a silent sneer. It wasn't perfectly mirroring me. I stumbled toward another door, the original front door of my house. Somehow, impossibly, it stood inside the living room. I didn't care how. I grabbed the doorknob. Behind me, I heard a hiss, something dragging across the floor. The handle twisted. I yanked the door open. Cool air struck me like a slap. Light blinded me. The hallway did not vanish. The door did not slam. I fell onto the porch, my legs trembling, heart thundering. The house looked normal from the outside, siding, windows, roof, but I could still feel it behind those walls. A shifting, sentient labyrinth shaped by my own worst memories. A breeze chilled my soaked skin. My head spun. I leaned against the railing, trying to steady my breath. It had let me go, but it hadn't released me. Even now, I feel it. Its presence, its memory, the certainty that it remains alive inside, feeding off my shame. rearranging my past into rooms I never want to revisit. Maybe I escaped physically, but something of me is still inside. Whenever I close my eyes, I feel the locked doors pressing against my consciousness. Waiting, a chilling thought clings to me. Perhaps this isn't over. Perhaps it never will be. The house still stands silent, ordinary. But I know the truth. The real horror is in me now,